This is the story of a 40-year-old man who dies in a tragic accident and encounters Jesus Christ in his presence. He is shown the terrifying truth about the Antichrist. Keep watching until the end of this video. Let's begin. My name is Griffin Greenfield, and I never expected to die at 40. I've lived a pretty normal life in suburban Illinois. It's one of those places where the seasons are sharp and distinct. The summers are bright and sticky, and the winters have a kind of stillness to them, broken only by the sound of snowplows clearing the streets. I lived in a modest home with my wife, Mabel, and our 2 children. Our kids, Ulla and Alan, are the heart of our home. Ulla is 11, thoughtful and creative, while Alan, just 7, is a ball of energy who sees the world as a big adventure. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at ND today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith. The days passed in a routine of school runs, work, and family moments, nothing remarkable. Life felt like it would go on forever, and nothing could prepare me for what happened that cold afternoon. I'm a middle school teacher, a job that takes all my patience but is incredibly rewarding. Watching kids grasp new ideas makes it all worth it, even when I don't see immediate results. Faith was part of my life, but not in a deeply committed way. I wasn't raised devoutly, and while I believed in God, church was occasional. As I grew older, I prayed for comfort but never fully explored my beliefs. It was just there, like background noise, while my days were filled with work, family, and chores. Life in the suburbs was predictable: busy weekdays with work and kids, and weekends for soccer games and catching up on sleep. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and I was content. Looking back, I see how much I took that life for granted. I thought I had everything figured out, but I missed so much because I was too distracted. I was afraid to truly examine my faith, keeping it at a distance, unsure of what I might find. I didn't realize how unprepared I was for what was about to happen. Suburban Illinois seemed like the perfect, safe place for me until life surprised me in a way I never expected. I was just an ordinary man living a simple life, unaware that everything was about to change. If I had known, maybe I would have prayed more, hugged my kids tighter, or paid more attention to the whispers of faith in the background. But I didn't, and the storm that was coming caught me off guard. That morning started like any other. I woke to the alarm and the usual chaos of getting the kids ready for school. Ulla, responsible as always, was already up, while Alan needed some coaxing to get out of bed. Breakfast was the usual whirlwind, with Mabel helping out by making eggs and toast, and the kids chatting away. As I mentally ran through my to-do list, papers to grade, a parent-teacher conference, and a lesson plan on fractions, I had no idea that everything was about to change. The drive to school was routine. I dropped off the kids with a hug for Ulla and a fist bump for Alan, then went to work, where I enjoyed teaching my middle school students. I was proud of Marcus, who finally solved a tough math problem. Lunch was a quick parent meeting. Then I caught up on emails and prepared for the next day. By the end of the day, I was ready to go home, looking forward to a quiet evening with Mabel and the kids. The drive home was typical, with thoughts of dinner and stopping at the store. It all felt so ordinary, so predictable. Little did I know, this would be the last normal day of my life. It happened so fast. One moment, I was driving home, thinking about what to pick up from the store, and the next, my world was spinning out of control. There was no warning, just a sudden jolt that threw everything into chaos. The crash was deafening, metal screeching against metal. My body was tossed around, and the airbags hit me with brutal force. Everything felt disjointed, like I was both in my body and outside it. In the seconds after the impact, there was an eerie silence, then a dull, suffocating pain in my chest. My head spun, my vision blurred, and I struggled to breathe. Sounds were distant, like I was underwater. Panic set in, and a flood of questions overwhelmed me. But everything felt like it was slipping away. And then something shifted. I felt detached from my body, watching it slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling down, but no longer feeling any pain. A strange calm replaced the fear. I wasn't scared, just there. I saw the paramedics arrive, working urgently. I wanted to tell them I was okay, but no sound came out. I was trapped in an invisible space, unable to interact. They pulled me out, doing CPR. One man's kind words about not giving up made me want to reach out, but I couldn't move. Time felt distorted, too fast and slow at once. The thought of my family waiting, unaware, was almost unbearable. Then something changed. The light softened, warmer and more peaceful than the harsh ambulance lights. It felt like a gentle pull, drawing me in, and I couldn't resist. There was no fear, only love and calm. The chaos faded, and I felt completely safe, as if everything I feared was being washed away. I didn't understand it, but I didn't need to. As I moved toward the light, the peace grew stronger. It wasn't just the absence of pain, but an overwhelming feeling of love. I felt lighter, freer, as if every burden had been lifted. It was like I was truly alive, leaving my body behind. The light wasn't blinding, just soft and warm, guiding me without fear or hesitation. I knew I was meant to be there. As I moved into the light, I saw him. Jesus Christ wasn't how I imagined his presence radiated love and understanding, seeing every part of me, every fear and failure, and still loving me completely. His eyes were deep and compassionate, filled with eternal wisdom. He didn't speak, but I felt his words in my heart, understanding everything I'd been through. There was no judgment, just kindness and patience, as if he had been waiting for this moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, yet authoritative. "You are here for a reason." His words resonated deeply, and I knew it wasn't random. As he reached out, I felt something shift inside me, like I was being healed and realigned. I felt whole in a way I never had before. Then he showed me. It wasn't like watching a movie. I was fully immersed in the visions, living the sights, sounds, and emotions. First, I saw Earth ravaged by storms, earthquakes, and floods. Cities crumbled, forests burned, and people's cries of fear and desperation echoed around me. Next, I saw a man, seemingly full of light and promise. He spoke of peace and unity, drawing people to him. But I knew immediately he was the Antichrist, a deceiver, using charm to manipulate and control. He created a global currency system, advanced AI, and a surveillance state that controlled every aspect of life. He even performed miracles, convincing people he was divine. Those who resisted were persecuted, and believers in Christ were hunted. Overwhelmed, I turned to Jesus and asked, "Why are you showing me this?" His response was gentle yet firm. "You must understand the times to come. Prepare your heart and help others. Many will be deceived, but those who remain faithful to me will find hope." He showed me small, faithful groups resisting the deception, relying on him. They were a light in the darkness, their faith unshakable. Though I didn't want to leave his presence, he told me, "It's not your time. You must go back." I understood, knowing my life would never be the same. I couldn't ignore what I had seen or the calling on my heart. The visions were real. Earth in chaos. Earthquakes, floods, and fires ravaged the land. People were desperate, societies unraveling, fear in every face I saw. Amid the chaos, he appeared, charismatic and soothing. He promised peace, unity, and solutions. People flocked to him, believing he could restore the world. Governments hailed him as a savior. But beneath the surface, I felt darkness. This man, the Antichrist, wielded otherworldly powers. He used advanced technology, including a global currency system, to control humanity. Without it, people couldn't survive, and the system became a tool of oppression. He used AI and surveillance to monitor everyone, erasing privacy and punishing those who resisted. He performed miracles to deceive people. But I saw the truth: they were lies to make people worship him. The world seemed perfect, but it was a facade of control and fear. Those who refused him were labeled enemies and persecuted. Families were torn apart, believers hunted, and their voices silenced. Even in the darkness, there was light. Jesus showed me small groups of believers who refused to bow to the Antichrist. They were scattered, hiding, but their faith was unshakable. They prayed, supported each other, and relied on God, not the world systems. Their courage was incredible. They faced persecution, hunger, and death, but stood firm, knowing their hope was in eternal life with Jesus. They fought with love, prayer, and truth, shining like a beacon in the darkness. Jesus wanted me to understand these visions, prepare for them, and help others do the same. His voice echoed in my heart. The deception will be great, but my truth is greater. Stand firm and do not be afraid. When the visions faded, I felt both the weight of what I saw and the hope of faith. I knew I had to share these visions, to be a voice for what was coming and help others prepare for both the trials and the hope through Jesus. As I stood in his presence, the weight of what I saw hung heavy, but his peace steadied me. I understood this was a calling, a purpose I could no longer ignore. Jesus spoke with authority and love. What you have seen is the beginning. The enemy will deceive and destroy, but I have overcome the world. Those who remain in me will not be lost. I clung to his words, feeling them sink into my heart. They were a lifeline, a reminder that even in darkness, there was hope. His love surrounded me, giving me the courage to listen as he continued. You must prepare your heart and help others, he said. Times ahead will be difficult. Many will be deceived, but those who seek me will recognize the truth. I thought about the deception, the Antichrist's charisma, the technological miracles, the false promises of unity. Jesus showed me how easily people could fall into the trap. The price of accepting these lies would be far greater than they could imagine. How will they know the truth? I asked. They will know if they know me, he answered. My sheep hear my voice. Teach them to remain in me, to trust me above all. His words were simple but profound. It was about knowing him so deeply that his truth would always shine brighter than any deception. Jesus shared signs to watch for advances in technology, a global currency system, and the rise of AI and surveillance. These things will come, but do not be afraid. They are signs, not the end. They are meant to awaken, not destroy. I asked, how will the faithful survive? How will they stand? They will not stand alone, he replied. My Spirit will guide, strengthen, and sustain them. They will find each other, drawn together by their faith, and become my light in the darkness. I saw those small communities again, hidden away, praying and encouraging each other. They were ordinary people, but their unwavering faith made them stronger than any force the enemy could wield. They didn't have much, but with Jesus, they had everything. Their trust in him gave them peace the world couldn't understand. Tell them, Jesus said urgently. Tell them to prepare in faith, not fear. Tell them to build their lives on my word and seek me now, While there's still time. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It was overwhelming but freeing. He would be with me every step of the way, just as he would be with those who listened and believed. The light around us began to fade. I didn't want to leave, but I understood my work wasn't done. You must go back, he said with love. But remember, I am always with you. As the light dimmed, I felt myself returning to my body. His final words echoed, "Be strong and courageous. Trust in me, and you will not be shaken." The visions weren't just for me, they were for everyone. I knew my life would never be the same. Waking up was like emerging from a deep sleep. But instead of feeling rested, I felt an aching heaviness. The beeping in voices slowly brought me back. A nurse was by my side, amazed that I was awake. "Isabella," she said, her voice trembling. "You're awake." I recalled the crash, the pain, and the sight of my body being pulled from the wreckage. Was it real? Had I really seen Jesus? Or was it a dream? Before I could process it, Mabel rushed in. His face was pale, tears streaming down as he grasped my hand. "Isabella, you're alive!" His words hit me like a wave. Somehow, I had made it. I squeezed his hand, letting him know I was there. The doctors entered, their expressions a mix of amazement and professionalism. Dr. Patel introduced himself, still in disbelief. The doctor carefully explained my condition. "You sustained severe injuries, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and head and chest trauma. We weren't sure you'd survive." He paused and then said softly, "It's a miracle you're alive. Your heart stopped twice during surgery. We had to revive you. Yet here you are, awake and stable. It's nothing short of extraordinary." I glanced at Mabel, who nodded but looked visibly emotional. The nurse adjusted a machine, and I noticed the cross around her neck. I wanted to share what I had seen, but the words wouldn't come. The days that followed were a blur of recovery, physical therapy, tests, and cautious advice from the medical team. While my body was weak, my spirit felt stronger than ever. I replayed the visions of Jesus, the light, and the overwhelming sense of peace. I knew, deep down, I had been given a second chance and a purpose. Mabel stayed by my side through it all. He listened patiently when I finally shared my experience. At first, I was unsure of how he'd react. But when I told him about the light and the visions, he simply said, "I believe you." His belief gave me the courage to share my story with others' family, friends, and some hospital staff. Not everyone believed. Some were skeptical, chalking it up to a hallucination or trauma. But I knew what I had seen was real. Jesus was real. The visions, the warnings, everything was real. The world needed to know what was coming, and how to prepare for it. The doctors eventually discharged me, calling my recovery nothing short of miraculous. They credited my will to live. But I knew the truth, it wasn't my will that brought me back, it was His. I left the hospital changed. Not just physically but spiritually. I wasn't the same person who had gotten into that car. I had been given a gift and a responsibility, and I knew I couldn't waste it. Stepping out into the fresh air for the first time in weeks, with Mabel supporting me, I felt overwhelming gratitude. I was alive. Yes. But more than that, I was alive with purpose. Whatever lay ahead, I knew I wouldn't face it alone. Jesus had shown me the way, and I would follow it. Coming home felt surreal. Everything looked the same: the kitchen with its chipped countertops, the family photos, the cozy living room where Mabel and I spent evenings. Yet, something felt different. Or maybe it was me. I couldn't see the world the same way after what I'd experienced. The kids ran to greet me. Ulla hugged me gently, her eyes filled with relief, while Alan, oblivious to my injuries, launched himself at me. I winced but hugged them both tightly, tears welling in my eyes. For a moment, I was just their mom again. No visions, no warnings, just a mother, grateful to be home with her family. But the weight of what I'd seen never left me. The memories of the visions haunted me, the faces deceived by the Antichrist, the faithful hiding in fear but standing firm, the chaos and destruction. I couldn't shake it, and I knew I wasn't meant to. Jesus had shown me these things for a reason, and now that I was home, I needed to figure out what to do with them. I started by sharing my experience with those closest to me. Mabel had already heard the story in the hospital, and he was supportive. But when I told some friends and extended family, their reactions were mixed. Some listened intently, their eyes wide as I described the light, the presence of Jesus, and the visions of the future. Others smiled politely, unsure whether to take me seriously. A few even dismissed it, saying, "You've been through a lot. It's probably just your brain processing the trauma." Those reactions stung more than I wanted to admit. It was difficult to put something so profound into words, only to have it brushed aside. But then I remembered the look in Jesus' eyes when he told me to share what I had seen. He didn't promise it would be easy, he simply told me to do it. So, I kept trying, even when it was uncomfortable, even when people doubted me. I wasn't sharing my story to convince anyone, I was sharing it because I had to. The truth of what I experienced was too important to keep to myself. As the weeks passed, I started noticing subtle signs in the world that seemed to align with the visions Jesus had shown me. Advancements in AI and surveillance technology reminded me of the systems the Antichrist would use to control people. Discussions of global economic instability made me think of the unified currency system I had seen. Even the growing cultural shifts, the polarization, the erosion of truth seemed to echo the warnings I had received. I couldn't ignore it. The world was changing, slowly but surely, moving toward the events Jesus had shown me. It wasn't happening all at once, and it wasn't obvious to most people, but the signs were there for those who were paying attention. I felt a deep urgency to help others see what I was seeing, to help them prepare. Not just for the physical changes, but for the spiritual challenges ahead. The hardest part was figuring out where to begin. I wasn't a preacher or a theologian. I was just a middle school teacher, a wife, and a mom. What could I possibly do to make a difference? I spent hours in prayer, asking Jesus for guidance, for wisdom to know how to carry out the task he had given me. Slowly, I began to realize that I didn't need to have all the answers. I just needed to take the first step. That step, for me, was sharing my story with my church. It wasn't easy. I was nervous, afraid of being judged or dismissed. But I knew I couldn't let fear hold me back. When I stood in front of the congregation and began to speak, my voice trembled at first. But as I continued, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I told them everything from the accident, to the visions, to the warnings Jesus had given me. By the time I finished, there were tears in my eyes and in the eyes of many in the audience. Afterward, people came up to me, some thanking me for sharing, others asking questions about what they could do to prepare. A few even shared their own stories of spiritual experiences and how they had felt a similar urgency to draw closer to God. It was humbling and encouraging, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. But it wasn't all positive. Some people were skeptical, even critical, questioning the validity of my experience. One man, a deacon in the church, told me bluntly that he thought I had misunderstood what I saw, that it was likely just a vivid dream brought on by trauma. His words stung, but I reminded myself, my job wasn't to convince anyone. My job was to share the truth as I had experienced it, and to trust God with the rest. At home, my life began to change in ways I hadn't expected. I found myself praying more, reading the Bible with a hunger I had never felt before, Passages that I had skimmed over in the past now seemed to leap off the page, filled with meaning and relevance. I started teaching Ula and Alan about what it means to trust in Jesus not just in words, but in action. We began having family devotionals, something we had never done before, and I watched as my children started to grow in their own faith. Mabel, too, was changing. He had always been supportive of my faith, even if he wasn't particularly devout himself. But now, I saw him beginning to take it more seriously. We started praying together, something we hadn't done since our wedding day, and it brought us closer in ways I hadn't thought possible. Despite these positive changes, I couldn't shake the sense of urgency that hung over me. The world was moving closer to the events I had seen, and I felt a deep responsibility to help as many people as I could. I didn't know where this journey would lead, but I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't go back to the way things were. Jesus had shown me the truth, and now it was my mission to live it, to share it, and to help others prepare for what was to come. As I lay in bed each night, reflecting on the day and praying for guidance, I felt a strange mixture of peace and purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew I wasn't walking it alone. Jesus had promised to be with me, and I could feel His presence every step of the way. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them, not because of my own strength, but because of His. The more I reflected on my journey, the more I felt the pull to leave others with a message of hope and urgency. The things I had experienced, the truths I had been shown, they weren't meant to stay with me alone. I knew that, deep in my soul. They were meant to ripple outward, touching lives, awakening hearts, and preparing people for what was to come. This wasn't just my story, it was God's calling for everyone who was willing to listen. I sat at the kitchen table one evening, the house quiet except for the occasional creak of the floorboards as the kids moved in their rooms. Mabel sat across from me, his face thoughtful, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. His eyes were warm but concerned. "You've been so quiet," he said, his hand reaching out to cover mine. "What's on your mind?" I looked at him, searching for the right words. "I feel like I need to do more," I said finally. "I've shared my story with some people, but it's not enough. There's so much more to say, so much more to prepare for. I feel like I'm carrying this message, this burden, and I don't know how to get it out there." He nodded, his face thoughtful. "You've already done so much," he said. "But if you feel like there's more, then maybe it's time to take a leap of faith." His words stayed with me long after we'd gone to bed. A leap of faith, that's exactly what it felt like. Stepping into the unknown, trusting that God would guide me even when I couldn't see the way forward. I prayed about it that night, pouring out my heart to Jesus and asking for His direction. "Show me what to do," I whispered. "Use me however you need to. Just help me be faithful." The next morning, I woke with a sense of clarity. I didn't need to have all the answers right away. I just needed to take the next step. For me, that meant sharing my story on a larger scale. I started writing it all down, every detail, every vision, every word Jesus had spoken to me. It was painful at times, reliving the accident, the visions of destruction, and the moments of doubt I had faced. But as I wrote, I felt the presence of Jesus guiding me, reminding me that this wasn't about me. It was about Him and the message He had entrusted to me. When I finished, I shared the writing with a few close friends and family members. Their reactions were varied. Some were moved to tears, others inspired to deepen their own faith. One friend, a pastor, encouraged me to share it with a broader audience. "People need to hear this," he said, "now more than ever." That's when I decided to speak publicly, starting with local churches and community groups. The first time I stood in front of a crowd, my hands were trembling. I was terrified that people would think I was crazy or dismiss what I had to say. But as I began to speak, something shifted. The fear melted away, replaced by a deep sense of purpose. I wasn't just telling my story, I was delivering a message of hope and warning. A call to prepare not out of fear, but out of faith. I told them about the light, the overwhelming presence of Jesus, and the visions of the future. I described the Antichrist's rise, the deception that would lead so many astray, and the small but mighty communities of believers who would stand firm. I didn't sugarcoat the challenges ahead, but I also didn't leave them without hope. The enemy's power is great, I said, but God's power is greater. Those who stay faithful, who build their lives on Jesus, will not be overcome. As I spoke, I saw the way people leaned forward in their seats, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. Some came up to me afterward, asking questions about how they could prepare. Others simply thanked me, their faces filled with a quiet resolve. I could see the seeds being planted, the way the message was beginning to take root. But it wasn't just about the big moments, the speeches, and the crowds. It was also about the small, quiet acts of faith. I spent more time with my kids, teaching them about the importance of knowing Jesus personally. We read the Bible together, prayed together, and talked openly about the world and what it meant to follow Christ. I encouraged them to ask questions, to wrestle with their faith, and to seek the truth for themselves. I wanted them to be ready not just for the challenges ahead, but for the joy and peace that came from truly knowing Jesus. At the same time, I started noticing changes in myself. My faith grew deeper, my trust in Jesus more unshakable. I found strength in prayer, comfort in Scripture, and a sense of purpose that guided me through even the hardest days. I stopped worrying so much about what people thought of me and focused instead on being obedient to God's calling. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of doubt, still times when I felt overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. In those moments, I clung to the promise Jesus gave me. I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. As time passed, I began to see signs that mirrored the visions Jesus had shown me. The rise of technology, the push for global solutions, and the erosion of truth that was all happening, just as he had said it would. I shared my observations not to instill fear, but to help others stay vigilant and grounded in their faith. My message remained clear: prepare your hearts. Build your relationship with Jesus now, while there is still time. The days ahead will be difficult, but those who remain faithful will find hope, strength, and salvation. As I write these words now, the weight of them is heavy. This journey has been one of the most challenging and transformative experiences of my life. Yet it's also been the most rewarding. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this for sure: Jesus is with us. He is guiding us, offering a hope that nothing in this world can take away. As long as I have breath in my lungs, I will continue to share that hope with anyone who will listen. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at ND today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith.